Disclaimer. To the Pharisees and Karens out there,
How dare you!
all guests on this show do not reflect the opinions of the host. The purpose of this show is to have interesting conversations, stretch our minds, and grow.
Not what we want!
If you are looking for an echo chamber, viewer and listener discretion
is advised.
You talk about extreme.
What is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we're about to fill it up.
Torches high.
Look at it from a different perspective.
Hey guys, what is happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we are about to fill it up. Welcome to the Prometheus Lens Podcast, the place where the conversations are always enlightening. I'm your host, Doc Brown, and here we like to use the allegory of the Prometheus Lens to take a second look at everything. Well, hey, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the hero's journey. Be sure and hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. Down below, we'll have our banner with all our social medias at their various platforms. Be sure and check those out. That would be much, much appreciated. Hey guys, I got a great episode for you lined up today. This is a man that's not no armchair researcher. This is a man with boots on the ground, exploring all these ancient sites and all the high strangeness of the world. I found him on Instagram and reached out, and this man was willing to come on and spend his valuable time with us and talk to us about some of his adventures. But I'd like to welcome to the show for the first time, hopefully the first time of many, Will Brown. We got another Brown in the house. Welcome, sir.
Yes, sir. It's a great last name. And thank you. I appreciate that. It used to be Braun, apparently. I recently did some, genealogy, and the first Brown to come over was a guy named Stefan Christian Braun from Germany in 1734, I believe. And at some point, it changed to Brown, the English pronunciation. So I'm happy to be here. It's a great last name.
It is, man. When I seen that, I was like, oh, awesome. Got another Brown in the house.
Yes, sir. Actually, real quick, not to derail the conversation before we get started, but some of the lineage traces back to Tennessee. There's actually a Brown family cemetery out there. Like, we might be related, distant, but we might be related.
Yeah, possibly, man. We go back far enough, we all go back to Adam and Eve, don't we?
Yeah. You do some research and see if it traces back to a guy named Stefan Christian Braun sometime. So.
Okay, yeah. Well, mate, for those that maybe haven't stumbled across your channel and some of your content, just give everybody an introduction of, who you are, background, what you do, and what your passions are. Just give everybody a feel.
Yeah, my name is Will. I'm from Kansas. I grew up in western Kansas on the Colorado border. And so I had easy access to like the American Southwest and really anywhere in the country, right in the middle. And so I spent a lot of my summer times, because I was a school teacher for 8 years, traveling around, looking at petroglyphs and old ruins out in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, especially. Utah is incredible. And I think it was around COVID 2020, the lockdowns happened, and I was not happy with those. So I did some research. I was like, well, all the national parks and national monuments and all these places are still open. This might be a good time to go check them out. I bought a drone with the stimulus check. I just bought a drone and started flying around, documenting places. I'd been traveling to Mexico quite a bit during my summer times too, and seeing a lot of stuff down there. And I've always liked a good mystery. And in particular, you hear about like these different possible migrations that have been unaccounted for from, Africa, Asia, Europe, that maybe predated Columbus and even the Vikings. The Vikings made it to like Greenland and technically part of Canada. So they might have been the first old world people here. But then there was all these other petroglyphs that you'd find that matched some interesting old world script. And so I was always interested in that, not necessarily convinced of it, and started wandering around, chasing mysteries, and really just any type of history that I found interesting. Kind of decided, man, I got like half a book here. It'd be cool to write a book. I should start a YouTube channel. Started this YouTube channel, had a couple videos blow up, drove my car down to Oaxaca, Mexico, and Chiapas, Mexico from Kansas, and documented a lot of the sites down there. And wrote this book, Enigmatic North America, Legends, Oddities, Controversial History. And really kind of as just a template for me to make videos on. You know, it's hard to sell a book these days. I don't make hardly any money on the book, but it was cool creative outlet to get started and start making these videos. And I grew a following on Instagram. Facebook is kind of popped off, Twitter and YouTube, and started going down to South America, which is where I'm focused now, Colombia, Peru in particular. There's a lot of stuff in Colombia, and working on that second book. So, you know, this is just fun for me. I really enjoy doing this, and I like making videos, and I try to go into all this stuff with the zero expectations, no angle. And sometimes I can maybe be convinced that something's fake. Sometimes I'm more confused than when I got in there. And yeah, that's kind of my approach is I try to stay unbiased, which is hard to do. We all have a bias, but yeah. So
yeah, and we were talking pre-roll. You used to teach history too, so you kind of even got a background in some of this stuff.
Yeah, I this is what I went to college for was secondary education with an emphasis in history, and then I taught economics for that during that entire time as well. A little bit of sociology. So I guess I taught the humanities for about 8 years, and a lot of that was online, which allowed me to, I don't know if they wanted me to be traveling, but I was. I'd use a VPN and no one ever asked questions. And I did my job good during the day, and during the evening, I'd be exploring the museums in Lima, Peru. And then on the weekends, I'd be doing some expedition somewhere in like the Amazon or the Andes. So it was a really cool time of my life, and it's just getting started. I'm no longer a teacher. I'm trying to do this full time now.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. That's what I was telling you pre-roll. I was like, yeah, you're living the dream. I got a full-time job now, but I do the podcast and do documentaries and stuff on the side. And like I went and bought a drone, some nice Sony cameras, and I've been going to like the mounds and stuff in North America and recording, doing some drone stuff. And me and my buddies went on a Bigfoot hunt, and I filmed it. So it's just fun, man. But yeah, I'd love to do this full-time. You're living the dream, man. I'm jealous.
I appreciate it. You know, that's the way to do it, is to keep your day job while you're starting. And I went out to the Bigfoot Festival to sell my book in Southeast Oklahoma. You know the one I'm talking about? I can't remember the name of the town, but it's right on the Arkansas border, mountains. A lot of people don't realize Oklahoma has mountains, but Tennessee, you actually have, a lot of people are always telling me, man, I want to do what you do. I'm like, man, the Americas, or the United States of America in particular, unlimited sites. You just got to open up your mind. You know, these mound builders, they didn't need to build these megalithic structures that you see in Peru that, you know, last, you know, for thousands of years. They didn't need to do that. They had this soil and the earth that they could make. And in many ways, it's more impressive. Tennessee's loaded with that. You're right next to Ohio with Serpent Mound, which is one of the best places I've ever been to. Flew my drone over that on the summer solstice eve and captured the like alignment with the snake's jaw and the setting sun. That's actually one of the best experiences I've ever done. Probably my top 5 experiences, many of them are here in the United States. So get out there. It's unlimited how many mound sites there are, and then archaeological sites in the Southwest as well.
Yeah, funny story. I did that too, but it wasn't on the summer solstice. I got kicked out of Serpent Mound. I went up there to film, and I seen all those signs, no drones, no drones. And it was on a Sunday. I was like, dude, I'm going to get all my filming done, and then I'm just going to launch this sucker.
Well,
I'll get some footage before they catch me.
Serpent Mound does not own the air above them. And there's a little area, I'm just going to say it now, there's a little area that's near Brush Creek that is a public access area. You can fly your drone there if you want. It is what do they call it? Like a military area where some occasionally have tests. But if you check out the drone laws, you're good to go as long as they're not doing any tests in there. And yeah, so I always get people in the comments, little Karens in the comments. How did you do this at Serpent Mound? Drones are illegal there. It's like, no, they're not actually. They may be illegal on site, but I wasn't on site. I launched and landed at Brush Creek on a public area, And it was way back. No one could hear me, and it's a beautiful way to see it. And I'm glad I did it. No regrets. Everybody can now see the incredible alignment, with the time lapse that I took. So, these places do not own the air above them, actually. So
yeah, and I found out later. I met a guy named Jeff Wilson, and he's like a part of the historical society over there, and he's over
Yes.
he's over the Friends of Serpent Mound.
Yeah.
And I talked to him. He was like, "Man," he said, "next time you're up and you want to get some good footage," he said, "just holler at me." He said, "I own the land that butts up to it." He said,
Nice.
Graham Hancock and all the guys that got all that good footage for those documentaries, he said, they launched from my place. He said, they can't do nothing if you're launching off their property. So
Exactly.
if you're launching and landing from their property, then they can do something.
Yeah, Jeff Wilson. That's a name I've never met him, but I know about the Friends of Serpent Mound. He's done a lot of cool things with that. So that's awesome.
And nothing too is like, even with the mounds, like before I got into this and looking into it, I was always expecting them to be just, huge, like Miamisburg, Miamisburg Mountain, Ohio. That thing is like a mountain in itself. But the more you get to looking, it's like some of these are just little small hills.
Yep.
And I find myself now coming through Tennessee, every time I see a little bump out in the field, I'm like, I wonder if that's a mound.
Exactly. Mississippi, Louisiana, they're everywhere. These little tiny bumps. Even on Louisiana State University's campus is one they think that's 9,000 years old. 9,000 years old. Like, more. There's been less time between the pyramids. Well, when the pyramids were supposedly built, we'll just say the dynastic Egyptians. There's been less time between the dynastic Egyptians and now than the dynastic Egyptians and when those mounds were built on LSU's campus, which is mind blowing. Some of them are gigantic, though. Have you ever been out to Poverty Point in Louisiana? Are you familiar with this site?
I've heard the name. Yeah.
This thing, God, I can't remember the math on it, but basically they built this thing in less than somewhere between 90 days and 1 month, maybe even less than a month. And they know this because of the erosion rates based on the soil. They did it in different layers, and it would have taken something like 32,000 dump trucks worth of dirt to do this. And they think it was created by hunter-gatherers. There's no evidence of agriculture in the immediate area for that time period. And so these hunter-gatherers had enough abundance to be able to focus on this incredible effort. And it's not only just, like they didn't just go build a mound. It's shaped kind of like a bird, and it's aligned perfectly with the summer solstice, the equinoxes. There's so much art. It's actually considered the world's biggest archaeoastronomy calendar in like the world, possibly. And these hunter-gatherers did it. A lot of times people talk about Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. And for those that are unfamiliar with that, it's like a site that's been dated over 12,000 years, and they think was created by hunter-gatherers. And it's kind of helped redefine what was a hunter-gatherer, how sophisticated were they. In my opinion, Poverty Point is just as impressive. It's not quite as old, but it was created by, in fact, it's not even close to quite as old. I think it's over 2,000 years ago, maybe pushing 3. I can't remember, but created by hunter-gatherers. Massive effort. Would have taken thousands of people to do it. If you do the math on how many buckets of dirt would take to, you can do some kind of estimations on how many people it would have taken. So they must have had enough food out there in the bayou, to be like, hey, let's do some cool stuff. Let's chill for a bit. We know we got food tomorrow. They weren't in a high time preference set of mind. They were comfortable enough that they could do these pretty cool things. So.
Yeah, that's mind blowing because you do like Göbekli Tepe. I've heard a lot of people say that's the paradigm that busts the paradigm. Yeah. And when you look at some of these megalithic sites and mounds and stuff like that, they had knowledge of the stars. They were mapping this stuff and calculating the solstices and the equinoxes, and even with Serpent Mound, that they even say that all those little humps line up with the lunar patterns and all this other kind of stuff. And I talked with a guy that had studied the rattlesnake disc down there in Moundsville, Alabama. And this is a plate, and it looks like it's just got 2 serpents curling around it. and got a hand and an eyeball in the center of it. And it's got all these little notches around the side of it. And this guy studied it out, and I do a terrible job re-explaining everything, but that episode I did with him, he totally broke it down and said those little notches and stuff, it was like a star map. If you're someone who still thinks the wild has secrets, who feels stories woven into the wind, this brand's going to hit home. The Soul Squatch makes Squatch-approved gear. And I don't mean that lightly. This stuff is functional, yes, but it's laced with legend. It's for people who believe in what's out there and what it brings out of them. They're hats, beanies, stickers. They're designed by folks who live and breathe the myth. No gimmicks, just real outdoor gear with soul. Go to thesoulsquatch.com and find something made for fellow believers, wanderers, or anyone who still listens when the woods go quiet.
Was it Dr.
Constellations?
Was it Dr. Gregory Little?
No, I've talked to Greg Little quite a bit, but this was another guy. It was Hunter something or another.
Yeah.
But he had studied it forever, and he laid out like a star map right over top of it. And man, it was perfect.
So for those that are listening, if you want to just Google image it's Moundville rattlesnake disc, right? Or the Moundville disc. And yeah, it has this hand with what looks like an eye. Dr. Little calls it an Ogie. He doesn't think it's
Ogie, yeah.
An Ogie, yeah. And it's, represents this basically this kind of I can't remember exactly, but something up in the sky that they would see. And
yeah, the wrist was Orion's belt.
Yep, Orion's belt. And I actually found a petroglyph in Missouri with that same hand with an eye print in it. And it's really interesting. That's a very common theme throughout the world. It's called a Hamza, like in the Islamic world, in even the old Christian world. That was a Hamza. They use it in Greece. You find that same symbol throughout the entire world. I actually got a little snippet about it in my book, and that's incredible. It's a tiny little disc too. They did this fine little carving. The pictures I always thought it was big. It's actually pretty tiny. So that stuff's incredible. I love it. And like I said, the United States is full of that. I am not one of these guys that likes to flame archaeologists. I love archaeologists. I do think, in fact, this isn't even their responsibility, what I'm about to complain about. We have done a pretty bad job, in my opinion, of highlighting just how incredible the ancient USA in particular is. And I think a lot of it's like, we don't have the big pyramids that they have down in Mexico, right? We don't have the megaliths that Peru has. Okay, but some of the mound sites in particular are unbelievably ancient, unbelievably sophisticated. And sometimes I get criticized for being sensational in my videos. Like, oh, you're being sensational. And it's like, what are you talking about? This is sensational. History is sensational. Like, look up the definition of sensational. It shouldn't be a negative word. This is wild what they were doing. And it should be exciting, especially the history of the United States and the modern day United States. It's very sensational, actually, what they were able to do. And I'm not gonna dull my spirit while I'm making these videos. I'm gonna really, tell you how it makes me feel. So, unbelievable sights out here.
It's just one of those things too. A lot of those people are armchair researchers or just couch potatoes watching YouTube and Instagram. It's easy for you to be sitting on your couch and say those things, but when you go and see these places, for yourself and in person, it's a whole different vibe.
Yeah, for sure. You go to a site a lot of times, and the literature will say, and me and Dr. Gregory Little talked about this a few years ago. At this site, they grew corn and ate seeds and nuts. Okay. So yeah, at this site, they ate food. Like, there's so much more to highlight. There's so much more to celebrate. And I think the astronomy angle is probably the one, and the spiritual angle, kind of the ethos of what their religion was, whatever, was going on, is probably what would bring more interest into this topic. I was talking to Dr. Gregory Little a few years ago. I don't know if you'll remember this. I got it on camera, but I need to publish it sometime. In like quantum physics and some of these other fields, for whatever reason, they have some room to kind of get into like the speculative. You have like the movie Interstellar, where they, it's kind of based on quantum physics, but it kind of gets into the realm of like, okay, like this is getting a little wild. I think history in general, archaeology, all this stuff would do themselves a favor by allowing themselves a little room to let people go with that without trying to hold people back. Stop accusing us of being sensational. This is sensational. We don't know what was going on through their minds. And, I was a history teacher for 8 years, and everybody came into the first year saying, history is my least favorite subject. Well, there might be a reason for that. It shouldn't be that way. History is wild. History is the most exciting subject if taught correctly. So.
Yeah. And that was the only subject that I paid attention to in class because I found it fascinating. And even as a kid, I was like, they're missing large pieces of this puzzle, and looking at the pyramids and just all these other megalithic sites. And I know these dumb hunter gatherers with the copper chisels,
right,
made these things. I'm like, no, bro, that can't be right.
For sure. And to be fair, a lot of archaeologists take issue with this because they say, no, you got it all wrong. We have known for decades now how sophisticated hunter-gatherers are. And that's great. But like decades is a very short time. And there's still some carryover, at some of these sites from like the original literature that's just boring. It's boring, man. Like you're being too careful about your speculation about what was happening here. So that's my little gripe. And it's not to anyone in particular, more so the complex that allowed all that to happen. It's getting better though. Like the internet is the new literature, right? The internet is the new place where you go and read the sign about what was going on there. And it's a lot more open source. You get a lot more knowledge being spread out as a result, and a lot more speculation, which is nothing wrong with that. So.
Well, with some of your recent adventures, man, fill us in on some of those. Like, where have you been? What have you seen? What stood out to you? What's blew your mind? Just kind of let us live vicariously through you.
Totally. Well, I see you got the elongated skulls shirt on, so we can talk about the Nazca mummies. Those are starting to blow up right now. Joe Rogan's talked about them several times. There's some big podcasts that are talking about them. Actually, the Danny Jones podcast just featured a video of mine. I was down in Peru a year and a half ago when a lot of this stuff kind of started getting a little more traction. The Nazca mummies, for those that don't know, are these 3-fingered beings that look humanoid for the most part. Some of them don't. Some of them are little reptilians, and they're very controversial, and for good reason, because there's a lot of people that full on believe these things are legitimate. They were born this way on this earth. I'm not one of those yet. There's so many red flags. We can talk about those, but there are also anomalies associated with them that are very hard to explain. And so I went down to Peru. And this is around the time where, it was like 6 months after they had the press conference in Mexico when all this blew up. I don't know if you remember that. The Mexican Congress was presented these tiny little mummies. Everyone was laughing. It made Stephen Colbert, all these, what was his name? Neil deGrasse Tyson, astrophysicist, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was making jokes about it. Well, I went down and I saw on the TV in the airport as I landed, that they found these fake mummies at the airport, and did some investigating, realized they were clearly dolls that were just made of like chicken bones. I was like, okay. But what about that big one, Maria? The big one's clearly not chicken bones. Like I've seen the scans. Like it's definitely, has human bones. The skull is humanoid. It's not, maybe it's manipulated, but it was a human skull. And so I ended up getting in contact with a lot of the proponents down there, the doctors that are doing stuff down in Peru on these that believe they're real, did full-on interviews and made a documentary that I hope it's okay that I plug right now called Show Me the Mummies on my YouTube, Incredible History. And the reason I called it Show Me the Mummy is because I was trying the entire time to see these things, and every time I would get close, something would happen. Something political would happen where all of a sudden the mummies were shut down. Or I was at this press conference in Lima. I was about to see the mummies, and all of a sudden the feds raided the press conference while I was there. Like literally the feds raided the press conference. I got it on video.
Wow.
You can check it out on my channel. It was funny. It was the Ministry of Culture. They were looking for the mummies. And as a result, I kind of became the mummy guy because I was the only English correspondent down there. The whole thing was in Spanish. And I'm just the only guy independent and, filming this, putting it on Twitter, translating it in English. I speak a little bit of Spanish. And as a result, it kind of went viral on Twitter. Some major media outlets picked up my videos. And fast forward to this last April 2025, I went back to Peru and I finally got to see the mummy Maria. And wow, Maria was the first one discovered. Maria has 3 fingers and 3 toes. Unusually large eye sockets or an orbital bone, maybe not like impossibly huge. I'm sure but it's pretty big.
Like the elongated skulls. I know they're like 30% larger.
She has an elongated skull, not like what you see in Paracas with the really, really long ones, but she does have an elongated skull. She has a protruding jaw. She also might not be a she. There's kind of a debate on whether she is a she. It's either Maria or maybe it's going to be Miguel. Like they're going to have to rename
Mario.
Mario. And actually the guy that supposedly found these is a Huaquero, a grave robber named Mario. And that's one of the red flags. We can talk about that. But you see, they've done these DICOM scans on these. And it's pretty interesting. Like, it's hard to find any points of manipulation. There is one doctor I found that said he thought that there was a missing part where the thumb should be, and that it might just be this with some added fingertips, but you actually see some of the tissue still in between. So if this is a hoax, and we'll talk about why it might be a hoax, and we'll talk about some more anomalies. If this is a hoax, it's one of the best hoaxes of all time. It's fooled doctors. It's fooled forensic scientists. There's actually a U.S. team right now with some of the best forensic scientists in the world looking at this. They're undecided. They're not saying either way. They're being professional about it. But some anomaly, and so I said that if it's the hoax, it's the best of all time. If it's not a hoax, there's 2 other scenarios. Scenario number 2 might be that this is some type of ancient ritualistic manipulation that happened during ancient times, which would be unreal. That'd be one of the best archaeological discoveries of all time, right? The amount of sophistication it would take. And then the third scenario, I guess, is this is a new hominid or a new being. Some of these wouldn't even be mammalian, I guess. They were born of this earth, or maybe not. Maybe, some people think they're aliens. That would just be the best, discovery of all time. Now, some of the anomalies, Maria also has 33 vertebrae. Most humans have 32. Not an impossible anomaly, but it is notable. I've said that on Derek's podcast. It happens rarely, but she does have more vertebrae. There's another mummy named Montserrat, which has a fetus inside of it. And
okay, that's what I was about to ask. I thought one of them had a baby inside, they thought.
Yes. And here's the thing. I think that I'm starting to see this image of the baby having 3 fingers. I kind of think that has been selectively highlighted. And to me, it's not clear whether that baby has 3 fingers. If the baby has 3 fingers, that opens up a lot more.
It's genetic then.
Yeah. You would have to have, it would be an incredible effort to also get inside there, manipulate the baby's fingers before you, that would be incredible if there was 3 fingers. That would mean that, we're possibly looking at a new being. They've done DNA testing on this, which I kind of don't comment on because I'm not a scientist on any of this, right? This is just interesting to me. And DNA can get a little muddy because it can be contaminated. If they are Frankensteining a bunch of stuff together, of course, there's going to be 33% DNA from a human from this part of the world or this, it could get really messy. So I don't know about the DNA, and I think that the U.S. scientists would really like to do like an independent DNA analysis in the U.S. and have better scanning options in the U.S., which they just do. The U.S. has better laboratories.
Hey guys, it's no secret that every single day your dollar loses its value. If a man invested $1,000 in silver in the 60s, today that same $1,000 would have magically turned into almost $30,000. Silver and gold only continues to increase in value. If you have a 401k or money sitting in savings, that is just a number in a computer system that is one EMP or hack away from being deleted forever. I've recently teamed up with Cornerstone Assets and Metals and started investing in gold and silver myself. And I highly encourage the listeners, if you have money in savings just sitting there, invest it in hard, tangible assets. The same thing with your 401ks. Take a 20 to 30% cut of that 401k, that number in a computer system, and invest into hard, tangible assets that is proven to only increase in value. Be sure to check out the link in the description or the number on the screen, and be sure to tell them that Doc Brown from Prometheus Lens sent you. Torch is high, guys.
They have these metallic, this is the one that's like crazy to me. So they have these metallic or even gold objects on their head, almost like covering like do you know what trepanation is? The ancients all over the world would practice something called trepanation, where they would put these little holes in their head while they were living as a way to like relieve the pressure from the brain and
migraines and bleed out demons. And yeah,
exactly. And actually there's still, some people think there's legit science to that. But it is interesting. You see these trepanated holes in Peru. You see them in the Celts did it as well out in Europe. And, all kinds of civilizations did it. But a lot of times they would cover them with these metallic implants. And one of the Montserrat, the one that has a fetus, has one of these, actually multiple of these. And that gets interesting. I don't know about the ossification for Montserrat, but some of the little ones, which I try to kind of stay away from. The little ones, I'm just like, dude, they look fake. But one of the most mind-blowing things was for the little ones, I was told by Dr. Zuniga Almora, the younger doctor that's both a doctor and a dentist. And the dentist part would actually be relevant to what we're talking about because he's seen this a lot. But they found this metal rod in the chest, and it had organic tissue ossified to it. So it's like called osseointegration. And it takes half a year for that to happen. Dentists see it all the time. Like if you get like a crown or something. Well, something that you have to put like an implant inside your mouth. The goal is that eventually your body is going to just like grow tissue over it and like, basically make it as a bone. And that happened with these little ones. And he clearly shows me in my video, show me the mummies. And so whatever that was would have had to, hypothetically, I guess, because maybe there's other scenarios I'm not thinking of, would have had to have been alive when that happened. They would have had to have been alive because it clearly had time to ossify. So there's weird things like that. There's very weird things like that. And that's on one of the little ones. If it's on one of the big ones, you go, okay, well, maybe they did just find an old mummy and then they manipulated the hands and the feet, right? The hands and the feet maybe are the only points of manipulation. And you had this elongated skull, which we know exists. And then you had these, trepanated, that would be explainable, but it's on the small ones. Like we're talking like these little, they don't even look mammalian. In fact, some of them have these eggs inside of them.
That's wild. Like I
Now,
looking at Brian Forrester's stuff, he even showed a bunch of skulls that showed that there's, like using that word that you use, trepidation or like brain surgery. I think that's what he called it in his books. But you could see a cutout, but then a thin layer of bone growing in the inside of, and like it was on its way of shutting, but didn't before they died. And so he's like, well, this shows you that this was the original cut, and they lived long enough for it to grow back for so long, so it was like they were doing brain surgery and dental work and all this stuff back in those times.
excuse me. Exactly. And that's not that's like not a controversial point either. Like, we know the Inca were doing interesting like little brain surgeries on each other. But I think Brian Forster also has a video. I think Derek was telling me about this from Megalithic Marvels that showed one of the like a newborn had an elongated skull, almost as if she was born that way.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't enough
Waikiki.
time. What's that?
Waikiki. That's they named it. Yeah, they had, and it looked like an infant with an elongated head, and the soft spot was still open, and it had molars, man.
Yeah, and if you look at the elongated skulls out in Paracas, I talked to Giorgio Tsoukalos, the Ancient Aliens guy. They don't have the same like sutures as like a normal human. And yeah, I really wish that we would go and take a real close look at that without being afraid of being, accused of pseudoscience or something like that. Somebody really, I mean, they're unbelievable. Now, if you want, we can talk about some red flags with the Nazca mummies.
Yeah.
Why I think people still need to be careful before they jump to conclusions. First of all, there have been fakes. Like, there's definitely been fakes. And they say, oh, they're souvenirs trying to be sold into, as souvenirs in Mexico. Okay, well, maybe the big ones are souvenirs that are trying to be sold as souvenirs to Russian oligarchs for millions of dollars. People say, oh, what's the incentive for them to do all this work? And it's like, well, $2 million is pretty good incentive. There is a dark world in Ica that is like a mafia that deals with grave robbing and selling antiquities. And it's a sophisticated operation. And there's been a lot of people get mad when I say this. Yes, Peru is like like the majority of Peru that I think of is this unreal culture, this unreal, incredible ancient history. However, in the last 100 years or even 200 years, there's been a lot of fake antiquities come out of Peru. It's like a business. It's a mafia. And so, people need to consider that. We still don't know where the exact site is. The proponents would do themselves a huge favor to show us where the site is. That's like archaeology 101. Like, where did you find these? No one will really say. And I have personally seen pictures of clear fakes. And I won't say any more about that, but I've seen pictures of fakes. And so Maria, Montserrat, a couple others, very hard to explain, but there are proven fakes. And I think even the proponents admit that some of these are definitely, some shenanigans are going on. So there are red flags to keep in mind there. But that being said, Maria is really hard to explain. So.
Yeah, my old man used to always say, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And one thing I noticed, there's a growing trend of people going like Mexico and finding all these ancient alien artifacts, supposedly.
Yeah,
Ecuador. You can get on Etsy, trying to think, eBay, all these different places, and there's people selling these things, and you can clearly see the raw material and the tools in the background on the shelves. I mean, they're making these things.
Yeah, there's a lot of fake stuff. I don't like one of the things that still is surviving on the internet that's so fake is you got these ancient Sumerian statues holding these handbags. Have you seen those before? which are incredible. And it is interesting because out in like the Maya and Olmec culture, you see some of the similar things. Even at, I'm forgetting the site. I visited it in Mexico. You see these giant statues that are holding these bags. And it's like, what are all these bags that are people holding? But then I saw this artifact that they keep comparing in Ecuador of the exact same kind of bird-like figure from Sumeria holding a bag, and it's like almost identical. And it's fake. It was part of Father Crespi's collection. And I'm not saying his full collection was fake, but that is a fake artifact. And, so there's a lot of fake stuff out there that you got to be careful with. People want to believe. Man, I love a good mystery, and I love the ideas that we don't, because it's not even an idea, it's a fact. We don't know nearly as much as we do now, right? Especially about the Americas. The Americas is such a mysterious place. There were things going on here that we have no idea about. I personally believe people have been in the Americas for way longer than people the current paradigm says, and we can talk about why. I think there's good evidence for it. I also believe that there were people coming from all directions. I don't think there was one migration across the Bering Strait. I think that there was probably rogue migrations from Europe thousands of years ago. I think there's probably rogue migrations from Africa. So I'm as open-minded about a lot of this stuff as anyone. But that you have to be careful because I'm not trying to lecture people out there, but a lot of people they already come in with the conclusion on what they want to be real. You got to lower expectations and just allow the truth to come to you, right? And a lot of times you won't get to the bottom of something, but that doesn't mean you start making up stories, because the truth matters, right? Like it matters. So people lump me into the alternative history community and scene. But actually, if you read my book, I technically debunk a lot of stuff. Not to be that guy. I'm not trying to debunk stuff. I just go into it, investigate, and sometimes that happens. Truth. Yeah, if you want, we can talk about my Vikings in Paraguay, the Vikings in South America story on that note, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, that's definitely when I seen one of the reels for it. And but kind of agreeing with you, I believe I'm a big diffusionist. I believe that we wasn't in our little bubbles and nobody was exploring. I believe we were sailing the seas long before, and there's been people doing experiments. And I think he was a German scientist or researcher, but he actually launched a boat right outside the Mediterranean there, and just the natural currents took him all the way to down there at the Virgin Islands in South America, Gulf of Mexico. So he was saying, even if you just was on a boat and floating, the currents would naturally take you out this way.
Yeah, a lot of these might have happened by accident. So the Romans had ports in the Canary Islands. The Romans did. So it's not impossible to think, Murphy's Law, if something can happen with enough time, it will happen. It's not impossible to think that a merchant got caught in a storm and ended up in the Caribbean. In fact, Puerto Rico, where I live, they have found stones that look very similar. And the explanation's always, well, this is a hoax from the 19th century, which some of them might be, but not all these things we're finding across the Americas are hoaxes, in my opinion. But they found, what is it called? Phoenician writing on it. And
next to Michigan.
Yeah. Well, and then you have another thing that I've done, and there's so many things I could talk about, but real quick, before I tell you about the Vikings in Paraguay, I went and took a time lapse out in southeast Colorado of what appears, some people believe, is Celtic ogham. And I took a time lapse on the spring equinox of the sun shining perfectly on it inside this cave. Regardless of whether it's Celtic ogham, whoever put it there thousands of years ago did it with the intentions of the sun hitting it, on that day. And you find this Ogham-like writing. Ogham is this ancient script that deals with these notches. You see some of it in West Virginia, and the main place you find it is in Ireland, a little bit out in, I think, the British Isles as well. But you see similar markings all across the world. Actually, in fact, I saw some of it down in Paraguay.
Are you a hunter, a hiker, or just an outdoor enthusiast? Well, if you are, you know that good quality gear is hard to come by. And finding all-American made is like finding Bigfoot in the woods. Hence the name of Squatch Survival Gear. Head on over to squatchsurvivalgear.com. Use the code PLP10 for 10% off store-wide.
So I'm with you. I'm a diffusionist, but also I think I think there's a blend of things. I think isolationism does make sense. We are, at the end of the day, on a small rock out in the cosmos, so it makes sense that humans would maybe find the same symbols that other humans would find in elsewhere, different parts of the world, just by looking at the stars. We were all looking at the same stars. So it makes sense that some of those symbols would maybe pop up in isolation. But, you can't be a full-on isolationist. Humans have been sailing for a very long time, and they've been good at it for a very long time. The Phoenicians, like, didn't they make it down to, like, almost the southern tip of Africa or something like that?
Yeah,
you're telling me they
a lot of them
couldn't
think that they were going around there and even hitting Asia.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the Romans were, right. The Romans, for sure. I think there was a merchant that is rumored to have made it. Sorry about if you're hearing the traffic, but anyways, let's talk about Vikings in Paraguay. So there's this. Can you hear the background music? Right? Not music.
Just every once in a while.
It appears to be a little bit of a party on the street right now. People are honking. Sorry. I have to cut that out. But so I'd always heard these rumors of these Viking runic inscriptions down in the remote jungles of Paraguay. Paraguay is a landlocked country in South America that borders Brazil and then Argentina on the south side of Paraguay. And, I read this book by a guy named Mayhew. I think it's Matthew Mayhew or Jacques Mayhew. And he came from France after World War II. He was a Nazi sympathizer, maybe even collaborator. So he got out of Europe after World War II and started teaching anthropology down in Argentina. And he went on this expedition after hearing these rumors of Vikings and Viking runic inscriptions like Elder Futhark in Paraguay. And then also the tribes out there in Paraguay had these legends of, these white people that came from the East, which is actually a common legend that you hear all throughout South America. You got Bochica, Colombia. You have
Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha.
Exactly. All of those. Viracocha down in Bolivia and Peru, Quetzalcoatl, forgive me. And then you have Bochica out in Colombia. Well, you have the same story down in Paraguay, which is interesting. But he goes on this investigation and he writes this book, and you never see really any pictures. There's a couple photos of some interesting kind of inscriptions out there. But really, he draws all these elaborate things that look like a mixture of Phoenician, Elder Futhark, which is a runic inscription from like the Nordic areas. And so I was always interested in this. And I decided, he also talked about these megalithic walls that was a fort for this Viking king that ruled the area. I mean, he really was like, using his imagination. He basically wrote like a narration book. And of course, he's always gotten accused of, he was a Nazi. He was trying to prove something, which might be the case. That might be what happened. I don't know. But I decided to go down there and see if I could find any of these runic inscriptions. This is an area that's controlled by this, I believe it's the PCC, which is like this communist guerrilla group. Paraguay is actually a very safe country, but the northeast corner of it is controlled by this like paramilitary communist group for a long time. They're narcos. They like, deal in drug trafficking. They literally kidnapped the former vice president of Paraguay back in 2021, not long ago. And he's presumed dead.
Wow.
Like he's probably dead. He's dead. He's gone. Like they've never heard of him since. And, so kind of a hardcore area, but there's a national park, and I knew if I just stayed on the road, I'd be fine. I rented a car in Asuncion, drove to this place, and saw some other petroglyphs, got some numbers from the locals there that I could contact, and made arrangements to kind of go on my own little expedition. And when we went hiking with my guides out there to these overhangs in Cerro Cora, and sure enough, I found runic inscriptions. And you can see this, I think it's my latest video on YouTube. I found actual runic inscriptions, not just kind of things that look like runic inscriptions, but actual runic inscriptions. And also found the megalithic wall. And immediately when I saw the megalithic wall, and I know it's the one he was talking about in the book, I had to do some internet sleuthing and some Google Earthing, but like I'm confident I found what he was talking about. It wasn't a wall. It's totally natural. I'm as open-minded to some of that as anyone. I do think that there are natural landscapes that actually might be, pyramids and stuff like that. I mean, Teotihuacan in Mexico for a long time just looked like a mound until they actually excavated it. But this appears to be natural. It is an impressive feature just in the middle of this jungle. It's very impressive. You can see it in my video.
It's actually got some right angles and stuff. Certain sections of it does look like huge blocks, but if you look at the whole picture, you can see.
Yeah, you're right. So when I first came up upon it, I was like, whoa, this is interesting. Flew my drone. It's one big, massive, like mile long. I think it's basically a volcanic dike, or not I don't want to say volcanic, but it appears to be like a dike. You know what I'm talking, like the,
the ground breaking loose and pushing up.
Exactly. And so I was immediately like, okay. And then I found the runes and I was like, well, this is interesting. Put them online and had some people do some translations that are from Sweden, some rough translations. And I think it was Sigthor Munk, M-U-N-K on that last one. I contacted Professor Henrik Williams from Uppsala University, who's like the leading runologist in the world. He's investigated the Kensington runestone in Minnesota. He's investigated the one down in Oklahoma, which is my favorite, but the Hebner runestone down in Oklahoma. There's a lot of these runes that pop up throughout the United States. And he said, it's hard to cut. It's definitely an old Elder Futhark. The first two lines, kind of hard for me to determine. It's kind of weird, but the last one is Munk for sure. And I went back to the book, Vikings of Paraguay, and I found out the leading runologist for that expedition. His name was Professor Munk. And so, he's dead. He's not here to defend himself, but I'm pretty sure Professor Munk carved that into the wall about 60 years ago. Maybe 60, 70 years ago. And it makes sense. If you look at it, the lichen is not necessarily overgrown like it is on the rest of the petroglyph, because there are other legitimate ancient petroglyphs on the wall. Lichens just covering it, right? The fungus. These not necessarily. They look a little newer. But it still was cool because I wasn't expecting, I knew that something like that existed out there, but I wasn't expecting it to be at the site that I found. And it was quite the adventure. So,
yeah, it's like teenage kids tagging the underpass.
Exactly. In this case, it was a professor, leading expert in runologist. I don't know why he did it. But here's the thing. Supposedly there's hundreds more out there. And they're in some dangerous parts that I can't necessarily get to. So I put out a little bounty. If anybody can get pictures of some of these for me and let me know, it'd be cool to see some of them. So, that was probably one of my funnest journeys that I've done. But I do think that one was probably a fun little story they made to sell a book. And it did sell. That book did very well. They made some money on that book.
Yeah. And that's a lot of things that a lot of the people that want to try to debunk stuff use, like with the ancient mound builders and the giants narrative.
Yeah.
You know, you see all these newspaper clippings and stories about finding 8-9 foot tall giants in these mounds and stuff. And Abraham Lincoln even mentioning giants in his Niagara Falls speech. Right. But everybody now is just saying, oh, they're just sensationalizing that stuff just to sell newspapers.
So do you want to talk about the giants? Because I got an interest. I think I have an interesting perspective on this. A lot of it I owe to Dr. Gregory Little, who I interviewed about this topic. He did a deep dive on this, and him and I believe Andrew Collins co-authored a book called The Denisovan Origins. And for those that don't know, the Denisovans are this new hominid species they found. Some people think that they were bigger than modern day Homo sapiens. It's kind of controversial because they're really looking at teeth, and it's hard to, there are some people that are just normal size that have abnormally large molars, but it's kind of interesting. And, a lot of this has to do with the Smithsonian coming out at some point and being like, all this giant stuff is fake, right? Well, the Smithsonian themselves, through the Carnegie Institute and their Bureau of Ethnology back in the 1800s, reported on what Dr. Little and Andrew Collins could find. They reported on at least 17 skeletons that were over 7 feet tall. That's just the ones that were over 7 feet tall. There was a number that were 6'6", 6'7", 6'8". And so a lot of this comes down to, what is your definition of a giant? We're so used to in our world being like, 7 feet's not a giant. Well, actually, yes, it is. It's very, very rare to be a 7 foot individual. We're used to it
less than 1% of the population.
Right. We're used to it because we see Shaq dunking on people and chopping it up with Charles Barkley every night. And we love Shaq. We love all these people. We see NBA all the time, and we kind of just think, oh yeah, there's 7 footers out there. No, it's extremely rare. In fact, if you are 7 foot, the odds of you making the NBA is pretty high. It's a rare thing. So what is a giant? Well, they found 17 plus skeletons in there. And a lot of people say, well, they didn't know how to measure it back then. Yeah, they did actually. They didn't know how to measure it back then. We've known how to measure it for a while. And they even specify in the Bureau of Ethnology 2 different measurements at times. They say this is probably what he would have stood at, the skeleton would have stood at when it was living. And oftentimes 7'2". I think the biggest that they reported on was 7'8". So this idea that they were finding 8 footers, maybe that's bull crap, right? Like maybe that was exaggerated by the newspaper, but they were finding big skeletons from the Smithsonian themselves. That's directly from their mouth. Bureau of Ethnology, you can check that out.
Large amounts of them too.
What's that?
Like in condensed space, they were finding large amounts of them. It just wasn't like it was anomalies. Like when they were finding a graveyard, there was 10 bodies there.
Yeah,
7, 8 out of 10 was 7 foot or more.
And then
so it was like a whole population of these top people.
Right. And so also they would sometimes be at the center of these mounds, indicating that they were maybe like the elite of the society. And in particular, the Andeans, which are in your neck of the woods. So the Andina people, the Andean, I might be saying that incorrectly, but Ohio, Andina. I probably shouldn't be speaking about this too much because I still need to, it's not my forte, but it's an interesting conversation because Dr. Little has this theory that they might have had a little bit of this like haplogroup X DNA, which might have been Denisovan in origin, and that these people were taller, and that they, might have ruled at one point before some rebellion. And you have all these Native American oral stories that talk about how like the giants were the rulers until they rebelled against them and killed them. And it's like, yeah, maybe there was some revolution or something like that, and these tall beings. They don't have to be mythological. They don't have to be anything we don't even see today. But these tall groups, you know, what's the average height of a Native American that they're finding in a lot of these graves? I think like in the Anasazi out in the Southwest, I think like a male was like 5'4" or something like that, right?
Yeah, 5'4", 5'6".
All right. Well, you got a 7-footer. That's a giant. You know, that's a giant right now. I'm pretty tall. I'm 6'4", 6'4.5". My brother is a literal giant. He's 6'8". You know, you get to 7'4", which is possible. That's a giant, right? So I think a lot of this is just like, what is a giant? And in my opinion, anything over 7 foot is a giant. You know, that's a very rare thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And even like in the biblical narrative, you have all these giant clans listed, and that they were the kings of their clans and tribes. And when they come time for Israel, Israel said they wanted a king. And it says specifically, they wanted a king like the other nations.
Right.
And so they chose Saul. And it says specifically they chose Saul because he was head and shoulders taller than the rest.
Yeah. And then you have the Mesopotamia, you know, they're holding these like almost, it seems like they're holding, maybe they were children, but it seems like they're holding like a normal person as old as if they're a child. Was it David?
Yeah.
I know there's David. I know there's David and Goliath, but was there a king? There was a king. Maybe it's the one you just talked about that was supposedly, you know, over 8.
Yeah, King Og.
King Og. Okay.
He had a bed that was like 10 foot long or something like that was the measurements.
Wow. That's wild. Yeah. And, you know, I think that's what it comes down to is what is a giant? Nowadays, we've lifted our expectations of what a giant is due to Hollywood, and we're also taller now. We have access to a full macronutrient diet, so we are taller now. So back then, you know, these stories pop up. That doesn't mean they're not real. You know, now some people do think there was 12-foot people. I don't, maybe. My thing with that is, my thing with the cover up is, you'd think we'd still find some of these today. That's the only thing that holds me back. Like, did they truly find every single skeleton? I guess maybe, because if you're a giant, you would be maybe considered a special person, and you would be buried inside the mound. And they have excavated most of the mound, maybe not most of the mounds, but a lot of them. But yeah, I mean, it'd be nice to see some photos of those. But if you look at the Smithsonian themselves, the Carnegie Institute and the Bureau of Ethnology, they report on it. They actually report on it. Over 7 feet. Tallest being 7'8", I believe.
Yep. And it's wild. And that's what a lot of people theorize too. That's why they made those indigenous peoples acts to keep people from digging and finding the giants. You know, that's what a lot of people theorize.
NAGPRA?
Yeah, I think so. But like, even when you talk to like the locals, I can't remember the local tribe that was around Serpent Mound. When they first discovered it and started reaching out to him, the head chief or whatever was saying, no, we didn't build this.
Yeah.
We found this, and, you know, kind of hung around and added mounds to it and stuff like that. But no, we didn't build it. It was here when we got here. And now all of a sudden they've changed their narrative. Oh yeah, we built this, and they passed this law and put everything under protection. And honestly, if you look through history, that's nothing new. A lot of ancient peoples find sacred sites or megalithic buildings and things like that, and they notice that there's something special about this place, and they add to it, and they build on top of it and around it.
Yeah, I think Tiwanaku down in Bolivia, similar oral history. The Spanish reported that they said that the people that were there around the area said, oh yeah, that's where the giants built Tiwanaku. And so, yeah, it's interesting. You do have this story everywhere, and all throughout North and South America. Yeah, the NAGPRA thing is starting to get heated again. I don't know a lot about it. I just know that there's been reports of Native American exhibits and museums basically vanishing due to the repatriation. And on one hand, it's always bothered me that historians have never given more credit to the Native American oral histories themselves for like, to really help verify some of their stories or the archaeology themselves. It's often kind of just dismissed a little bit, I think.
The mythology.
Right. And I don't think it should be. So on one hand, like I want the Native Americans to have more I hate this word, but equity in this, but the whole NAGPRA thing does seem like a slippery slope because all of a sudden things are becoming political and you're not able to make it. It feels like it could become a situation where no matter what they find, it will be classified as some spiritual or ritualistic thing that's so important that it can't be thoroughly studied. It has to immediately be repatriated.
Yeah.
So yeah, it could be a slippery slope, controversial topic. People get really pissed about it on both sides.
Yeah, definitely. Especially with the history they had and how, the government's done them and the Trail of Tears and just kept, pushing them out and, they done them pretty crappy. So on one hand, I can see them wanting to, if they think this is something pertaining to their culture, it's the last thing they got and they want to hold on to it. I can definitely see that.
Yeah. The grievance is real. I get it. But also, while this hasn't hit South America yet, they got full-on mummies and bodies in the museums in South America. And so one thing I've been trying to do lately, not necessarily the bodies and the mummies, but any interesting artifact, I'm trying to basically build a catalog of these small, obscure museums down in South America, and taking as many photos as possible, because that politics, that political thing that's happening with NAGPRA is going to go to South America next. And we're going to see things kind of vanish as a result. So if you're in a museum, take pictures. It might not always be there. And that's kind of really all I got to say about NAGPRA, because I don't know enough about it. And I'm just, I don't feel like picking that battle. It's a messy one.
Which, to back up your point, I've talked with L.A. Marzulli many times, and he talks about at some museum in South America, it was famous that there was these golden thrones.
The what?
Giants sitting on them. There was golden thrones with giants sitting on them on display for a long time, and then they just disappeared.
Wow. There was kind of a, I don't know if you call it a museum, but out in Goodwell, Oklahoma, there was a kind of a, I don't know if his museum is kind of more like an oddity, like freak show type of thing.
Freak show.
And they had these red-haired mummies, not giants, but these red-haired Native American mummies on display for a long time that they found in a cave near Kenton, Oklahoma, and actually visited the cave where they were found. There's really cool cave paintings there. And no one knows where they're at now. And I know that's not the only red-haired mummies that have been found. And people say, well, the red hair happens after death. I'm not a scientist. That might be the case. I'm not sure. But there's been other red-haired mummies found out in the American Southwest as well. And for sure down in Peru. You can see them in Peru. They haven't got rid of them yet. I've seen red-haired mummies in Peru. There's many of them. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, Will, I ain't going to take up much more of your time, man. I know this is your weekend, your time off, and it sounds like there's some excitement going on outside. You might want to go check that
out. In Puerto Rico, you never know what's going on. People will just start having parades in the street. I think it was a good excitement, but yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're good, man. But hey, before we leave, just let everybody know websites, Instagram, YouTube, anything that you want to plug if they want to dive into more of your fascinating content, brother.
Yeah, so main thing I want to plug is I'm starting to do group tours down to Colombia and pretty soon Peru. In Colombia, I'm taking groups out there to see the world famous pictographs in the Colombian Amazon. Like there's like 8 miles worth of pictographs. Some of them are dated to 12,600 years old. And I will be announcing that soon. And I've made it as cheap as I can to, it's my new business. So I'm kind of doing this tour agency stuff. And I'll also be doing an Inca Trail trip where I'll be hiking with you. I'll be on these trips with you. So I put together a pretty good trip. Incredible History at Incred History on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. And, I make long form videos on YouTube, and I make a lot of short form videos on Instagram. And I'm looking forward to getting into those tours. But I appreciate you having me on, Doc. We can do it, do it again sometime.
No, I definitely appreciate your time, man. Because like I said, I found your channel, and it's cool. Because guys, if you haven't found his channel, I mean, he takes cameras with him. He's got people, with him, I guess, filming him, or unless it's maybe tripod work. But he's filming all these places he goes to, and tells you what he's seeing, and you get to. It's like being there, guys. So you get to go on the journey with him. I highly suggest you check it out. It's
a low maintenance operation. iPhone, to be fair, a new iPhone, they're pretty legit, and a drone. iPhone and a drone. That's what I'm always going to do. I don't know if I'll ever, I don't want to say never, but I don't know if I'll ever upgrade. It's working out so far. iPhone and drone. So
nice, man. So there you go, guys. You are without excuse. If you got a cell phone, you can go out and start exploring and making some videos, guys.
100%. Seriously, make your own movie. It's coming to where Hollywood's done. We are the ones that can now go make the entertaining content. So,
yeah. Well, guys, be sure to check out his stuff. I will try my best to remember to have the links and stuff in the description to make it easier for you. That way you can just one click, go find him. And just remember, guys, this guy's a prime example. The difference between the known and the unknown is the journey. So, good journey, guys.